Okay, was talking with my son. We had an interesting conversation, and we were talking about the replacement, Saleh replacing Gase as head coach of the Jets. And he started giving me his whole theory on the fact that, replacing Gase, not much pressure, blah, blah, blah. We're talking. And I started to do some like deep thinking about how I feel about when the Jets make a change like that, when the Jets make a coaching change. Um, what goes through my head? How much does the past affect when the Jets hire a new GM or a head coach? Where's my head when it comes to the Jet past? How much is it influenced by some of the absolute nonsense that's happened with head coaches and GMs over the years with the Jets? And I started thinking about that. And I turned to him. I said, "You want to know something? It's complicated for me when a coach is hired. Right now, to this day, am I excited about Saleh so far and what he's done? Absolutely. Do I want to do cartwheels with Joe Douglas as our GM? 100%. Am I so happy the way Joe Douglas has finally set up a structure that the Jets' lines of communication look like a real NFL team? You know, coach reports to GM reports to the owners. I mean, it looks real. Everything they're doing looks real. Their draft picks, how they draft, why they draft the way they draft, it looks real. The way they're signing free agents and spending their money, it looks real. It looks thought out. It looks smart. So everything looks great. But my brain, being an old time Jet fan at 61 years old, just starts to think. It starts to think of how I felt like this before, how I loved certain coaches when they came along, and loved certain GMs that came along. How I loved, taking a kicker in the second round years ago. I mean, the list is just amazing. Being a Jet fan, an old-time Jet fan, on how skeptical you really can become. And the fact that you have optimism with a new GM and a new coach, pat on the back, man. I'm very proud of myself. I'm very proud of myself that I don't get all caught up in the past. But boy, does my brain leak there. And I started talking to my son. I said, when I talk about Salah replacing Gase, my brain goes further back than that. My brain has Gase replacing Salah replacing Gase, Bowles, Rex Ryan, Bill Parcells, Belichick on a napkin retiring from the Jets after one day, Walt Michaels, Lou Holtz. It just never ends. Al Goro. My brain goes back to all the coaches the Jets had and how I felt when they were hired originally. And I started thinking about that. And my son's looking at me, he goes, "Boy, that's kind of weird, Dad. I said that's how I get through being a Jet fan. That's how I'm able to piece and enjoy, the structure of the Jets and what the Jets have become lately." And then he said, we started talking about favorite coaches of all time. I said, well, not Belichick, when Parcells came in. I mean, I can remember when Parcells was hired as a head coach of the Jets. I remember that was the one time as a Jet fan. I can count on one hand, probably a couple fingers, and it was all I really need, when a coach that I really enjoyed being a Jet fan during their time as head coach. And Parcells was one of them because I remember when Parcells was being hired, I remember how badly we needed a big figure, a big personality, somebody that was bigger than the shit that came before him. And when I talk about shit, I don't mean our shit record. I don't mean our shit head coaches. I don't mean our shit GMs. I don't mean our shit games. I mean our shit, everything, every single thing you could possibly imagine. Because the Jets are one of those organizations. And as a fan, I have no problem being honest and admitting that. That's basically what we are. Going back, looking back. Do I believe that you can break it? I do. I do. That's why I so believe in these two guys right now. But I do believe it would take two guys like this, how easily you can make a mistake and stay down the same path. Because as a Jet organization, with what the past that this team has had, you just can't hire a solid good coach and a solid good GM. You need guys that are like just focused in, that don't give a shit about what I give a shit about. I don't need Joe Douglas to think the way I would think and be so concerned with him replacing the previous GM, but he's really replacing about 20 others that were just horrendous. How the organization has been so shitty for so long that it's just not about a couple drafts, free agent signings, and here we go, new Jets. That you got when you break through the wall of the shit that has carried this team for years. It's a big deal to me, not to them. They don't need that crap. When Salas gets up there and says, when he's asked, is it a big deal, dealing with the jet past, and did you see what happened last year and the several years before that in the past history of this team? Have you looked into he was asked that question. Have you looked into the history of the Jets? And I don't care, he said. It doesn't make a difference to me. And he's right. It doesn't. It doesn't. But to me, watching them work and what they're doing, it does. It does. Because I remember being happy and excited. And that's when I started telling my son the Walt Michaels story. Walt Michaels, to me, was one of my favorite, he's probably one of my favorite head coaches of the Jets of all time. Of course, everybody says Weeb Eubank, oh yeah, he won the Super Bowl. I was 9 years old. I mean, that's how I became a Jet fan. So, I was a homer, and that's how I became a Jet fan. I should have just not watched the game. But anyway, that's another story. So, during the time, I remember when Walt Michaels was head coach, it was one of the few times being a Jet fan, I felt proud. I felt proud of the team. I didn't have to worry about feeling like an asshole, that asshole things were going to happen, because they didn't. Don't get me wrong, Walt Michaels during his tenure had a couple difficult seasons. There were some really strong seasons, and the Jets were definitely headed in the right direction. There's no doubt about it. The history of Walt Michaels is basically that Walt Michaels was a coach on the Raiders staff, and he gets fired by Al Davis. Holds a major big-time grudge over it. Can't stand Al Davis. Gets brought on by the Jets, becomes the defensive coordinator for the Jets for the 1969-70 season. He's the defensive coordinator for the Super Bowl Jets. That defense was they were the key to that team. Joe Namath, Don Maynard, Boozer, Snell, unbelievable, great offensive line, but that defense was lights out. In fact, what that defense did to the Colts that day was one of the greatest Super Bowl performances by a defense ever. The defense was great, okay? And Walt Michaels was the defensive coordinator. So years pass on, they move on. Walt Michaels moves up, and they decide to make Walt Michaels head coach. So Walt Michaels becomes head coach. And during that time, the Jets slowly but surely start building a team. So by the time 1982 comes around, sorry about that, I still shake thinking about it. 1982 comes around, Michaels is now the head coach of a team that is playoff bound, and our offense coordinator back then was Joe Walton. So the Jets are in a very good position. We're going into the playoffs. But 82 is also a really bad year behind the scenes, we would later find out, for Walt Michaels. First of all, there was the player strike that year, and Walt Michaels was a prick. He was a Marine type guy. He reminds me a lot of Parcells, except for, believe it or not, Parcells is a little more flamboyant, a little more funny, with the press and stuff. Even his nasty shit that he says is funny. Michaels didn't. He could not make anybody laugh. He just didn't have that kind of sense of humor. He had nothing. He was just a straightforward dude. So when the players went on strike, that started out the whole 82 season. Also that year, his mother was his mother was very ill. Now, whether I knew that during the season or Yes, because there was a time where he left for a little bit, but didn't miss a game, I don't believe. His mother died, actually. She was very ill and died that year. I want to say it was late in the year, December, although late in the year back then, December, it could have been November, December. His mother dies. Also, at the time, later find out that he's drinking heavily, heavily depressed, um, on painkillers, has a really bad back, and has been prescribed painkillers for a good period of time. Not just a couple of months, a good period of time. I don't know exactly, I don't remember exactly how long, but he was on painkillers and drinking heavily and starts acting in some um, just his personality, which was never one to write home about. He starts acting even more reserved with the media and everybody else. But the Jets are going to the playoffs. And that's when things start to fall apart for Walt Michaels. The bottom line is the Jets start to prepare for the Raiders and Al Davis. And during that week, later find out, during practices, he'd be walking around the practice field and he would look up at the sky and just start making a fist and just saying stuff like, Al Davis, damn spies. Look at them. They're all spies. Bastards. I'm a son of a bitch, Davis. Cursing and swearing. And the players back then were like so confused by it. But a couple of veterans, basically, he said, listen, he's trying to fire us up, that, the Raiders are trying to cheat and do stuff. It's not very good at it. He's not very good at it, but I think that's what he's trying to do here. Meanwhile, there's a major paranoia setting in big time. Also during that week, documented, he was walking towards the team for a team meeting outside to close off a practice and just falls to the ground. The team rushes over to grab him and they go to pick him up and they asked him what's wrong. He said his legs just locked up. Not sure what happened. So, long story short, we're preparing for the Raiders. The game happens, and it's the first half, and the Jets are winning 10-0, and it's halftime. And the Jets come into the locker room, and as the team comes into the locker room, Walt Michaels is told, as the team sits down drinking their water, getting pumped up for the second half, and he's about to address the team, he's told he has a phone call. And, just grab it right off the wall there. Grabs the phone, takes it off the wall, says hello, and you just hear him starts cursing. I know this is Al Davis, you son of a bitch, I'm going to kill you. Starts threatening to kill Al Davis, who he thinks is on the phone. But the person on the phone supposedly was Leon Hess. And Leon Hess was telling Walt Michaels that he was not totally satisfied with the team's effort. And he would like him to sit Mark Gastineau for the second half. Very long story short, I know I saw the interview of this bartender in Queens who was the person that made the call to the locker room somehow. I don't know how it happened, but it happened. It happened. And somehow he got through. And the bottom line is he had a huge amount of money bet on the Raiders. And he got in to talk to Walt Michaels through an emergency or something. And Walt Michaels is now flipping out because he's positive it's Al Davis. And he wants to kill him. He's had it with him. And the team now is watching him, and they're just in shock. And they're just so confused over what they just witnessed. But somehow they got to get their crap together and go out and play a second half. And they hold on and beat the Raiders. They win the game. So the game finally ends. Gastineau plays the second half. The game ends, and now they're going to play the Dolphins. And now he starts turning his fury towards Don Shula. And still going with the whole NFL spies and all this other stuff. And staffers and everybody are reporting to Leon Hess the stuff they're witnessing from Walt Michaels, and that there's some real disturbing things happening here. But what are you going to do at this point? You're playing the Dolphins in a big playoff game. So now the Dolphin situation happens, which I'm sure everybody's familiar with. The Dolphins don't put the tarp down on the field. There's just a soaking, flooding rain. The field is a disaster. A disaster. Considering that during the game there's not a monsoon rain coming down. You've never seen a field in this kind of condition for something that happened previously. Honestly, not to defend Walt Michaels, how Don Shula got away with this is unbelievable. The bottom line is the Jets were a speed team. Their defense was fast. Their offense was relied on speed. Everything was speed, fast. Richard Todd ends up having the worst big game big game any Jet quarterback has even come close to having. It was a disaster, from the interceptions to the Dewey return. It was just horrible, horrible, horrible game he has. And of course the Jets lose in horrendous fashion. I mean, just remembering, as a fan, remembering the game, I just remember our own 40-yard line. I just remember us always being on the 35 or 40-yard line. We just couldn't do anything. We couldn't move. We couldn't get first downs. There was nothing going on whatsoever. And the Jets lose the game. And after the game, Walt Michaels hits rock bottom. He loses it. Gets on the plane home. And on the plane ride home, starts to drink and starts to curse Shula and the NFL. And all this is being witnessed by Leon Hess. And he starts berating the stewardesses, being so nasty to these stewardesses. And then really starts, kind of rightfully so, looking back on it, trashing Richard Todd, because Todd decided not to take the plane ride back with the team. He went privately. He did not want to come back with the team. So I could understand that, but that's something you hold in a meeting the next day and pull him aside and say, hey, that was a jerk thing to do. But he's trashing Todd. And out of absolute nowhere, attacks the team president's, Jim Kensel's son, and physically attacks him, had to be pulled off him. Whether Kensel's son told him to, behave, hey, try to relax. I don't know what happened, but Walt Michaels attacks him. And now it's over and the team comes home. And the next day, staffers and everybody are witnessing Michaels showing up at the Jet facility, walking around and just basically muttering out loud, really loud, thinking he's talking to himself. What a disgrace the NFL is. It's all a bunch of spies. It's all fixed. It's this, it's that. And they report back to Leon Hess. And Leon Hess quickly talks to Kensel, and they decide quickly they have to act. I'm going to try to say this with a straight face. They needed to act quickly because Joe Walton was a hot commodity. Their offense coordinator was Joe Walton. He was a hot commodity. And that there were several teams that were definitely hot for Joe, and he was going to be gone within hours. And the Jets quickly contact Joe Walton. They told him their plans. They want to keep him as head coach. They told him a little bit about the situation, not everything, and that quickly make a deal with him to stay on and be head coach of the New York Jets. In the meantime, they tell Walt Michaels to meet them at a hotel, him and Kensel, and probably some security people, and they meet at a hotel, right? So Walt Michaels shows up, and they basically inform him that he can either quit or he can resign. But he's no longer the coach of the New York Jets. And if he resigns, they have a letter already written up for him, and all he has to do is put his signature on it, and it's over. It's done. He's fired. And Walt Michaels, of course, signs. And that's it. That's it. Life goes on, and now we have that great head coach that other teams were lining up for, Joe Walton. And those teams really should have sent Walt Michaels couple bottles of Dom Perignon for somehow saving them from Joe Walton, because we ended up with Joe. And that's it. That's Walt Michaels' story. Now, you tell a story like that, but you let off saying he's one of your favorite Jet coaches of all time. And that's where we are. And that's the story of Walt Michaels. And that's the reason why I don't want Joe Douglas and I don't want Robert Saleh. I don't want them to think that they are taking care of anything about the Jets' past whatsoever. They just need to look at the team they took over, as Joe has done for the last few years, and Saleh needs to look at the team he's just taken over going into this season, and that the past to those two guys truly does not mean squat. It doesn't mean anything. It's a fresh canvas. They can paint their own picture. But for old-time Jet fans, it's a lot bigger than that, man. It's a lot bigger than that. So there's your old Jet time story of Walt Michaels, my favorite head coach of the New York Jets. Have a good one, guys. We'll come up with another video soon. Thanks.